All right, everybody, welcome back. I have a very special guest today. This is Carrena. She is very involved in the pro-life movement. I'll let her introduce herself in just a second. But we'll be talking about the state of the pro-life movement today. We'll be talking about pregnancy resource centers, what those look like, the threat of those maybe being targeted, and how those can continue to operate. But yeah, I am Sahil the Disciple here with Karina. This is Beyond the Culture.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to have you here. So, yeah, go ahead. Just for those who may not know you, who are you? What do you do? And how can people find you?
Sure. I'm Carrena Falls. I am a Christian first and foremost, but I'm also a pro-life activist centered in Minnesota. I've worked with several different pro-life organizations throughout the years. I'm just about 22. I've been doing advocacy since I was 16, so it's been a little bit so far. But I will be going full time with the Minnesota Pro-Life organization soon when I graduate in just about a month. Where you can find me, the main place I post is my Instagram, which is Carrena Fights for Life. You can find all my pro-life content there, everything I do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Karina. Yeah, I've known Karina for a few years now through pro life Instagram slash TikTok slash all of that. So yeah, she's been doing great work. So yeah, I definitely would encourage you guys following if you're interested in the pro life movement to give her a follow. And yeah, congrats, Karina. Yeah, I didn't know you were about to go full time into that. So that is super
Yeah,
duper exciting. Yeah, we are very blessed to have you in this fight and to be advocating for the preborn. So that's awesome. So yeah, I'll be sure to put all your links and stuff in the bio so that people can find you. But all right, Karina, let's get into it. So yeah, almost about 3 years ago now, the Supreme Court brought down the Dobbs decision, which overruled Roe v. Wade, and I personally was very excited. I was talking to somebody, just like if Roe v. Wade is going to fall, it's going to be several decades from now. It might not even be in my lifetime. And yeah, 3 years ago, no, the Supreme Court did it. So yeah, I was very, very happy to see that. But with Roe v. Wade falling, though, that has changed the landscape of what the pro-life movement advocates for and what it does. So yeah, my second question for you really is just since Dobbs, there has been, I would say, greater scrutiny against the pro-life community. What has changed since Dobbs? Do you think the pro-life message has become easier to share or harder to share since the Dobbs decision?
yeah. So, like I said, I've been in the movement for a while now, and there was a huge shift after Dobbs. Pretty much everything has changed, and I was blessed to be able to be at the court that day, which was a super cool experience, especially hearing, like them announce that Roe had been overturned. I mean, like everyone I knew was freaking out, so it was super cool. But I don't know how much you know about how Roe worked, but basically, before Roe, the US was the Wild West for abortion law. So Roe v. Wade was handed down on the same day as another accompanying court case called Doe v. Bolton. And those together legalized abortion through birth in every state under the exception for health, which Doe v. Bolton categorized as widely as financial health, familial health, emotional health, while Roe said you could restrict abortion after viability, but there had to be an exception for health. And so before Roe, we couldn't do very many or before Dobbs, we couldn't do very many meaningful abortion restrictions because of that. There always had to be a very broad health exception. And of course, the abortion doctor will let nearly anything pass under those health exceptions because there is the financial incentive. And while we did get some smaller abortion restrictions that did make a difference, things are completely different now that we can have gestational limits and even full bans in many states. And so things have completely changed. Now, the Dobbs decision basically said it's a states' rights issue, when Roe originally said it is a constitutional right, therefore all the states have to have it, basically through all 9 months. So finally, after all this time, we could have meaningful restrictions on abortion. But like you said, things have changed in the dialogue about abortion as well. I mean, before Roe was overturned, abortion wasn't really the main thing in the media, but now it seems like we're hearing about it every day. Sure, we heard about it some, but it was kind of a lot of hypotheticals. Like, what would happen if Roe was overturned? Here's all the horrible things that would happen: women would be dying, children would be abused, all these types of things. But now that Roe has been overturned, there's definitely a lot more propaganda in the media, bringing out different stories, showing them in very deceptive ways to try to shift the public's opinion through emotional manipulation. And so it's definitely a different conversation, which I think can be harder to talk about because people are being inundated with a lot of information. But it's also more on the forefront of people's minds now. And so that can make it also easier to bring up, given that there is a really constant dialogue about it.
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely noticed an increase in the way it's been talked about because before yeah I've kind of been in the pro life movement for a while now too, and whenever I would have discussions with family, friends, or others, it would be yeah it usually was hypotheticals, and some of my family members or friends would get they wouldn't be happy that I'm pro life, but they're like, well, Roe v. Wade's the law, so you can have your opinion, but at the end of the day, women will still be able to have access to abortions. It's like, well, now that Roe v. Wade is gone, it's just like, oh wait, now abortion can be stopped in
Right.
several states, and so yeah, people um, on the pro-choice side of things are definitely a lot more worried because, like, yeah, the pro-life movement can do actually does have some real effects. So
Right. It
yeah,
got real.
I do think it has been harder to share the pro-life message. We actually are getting results now, which is great. I'm glad to see that babies' lives are being saved. But um, yeah, that said, there has been seemingly more violence against pro-life members. I was seeing live action. There was a woman really just earlier this month. I think she ended up getting punched in the face when talking to somebody. And I don't know all the details of that. I've been off social media for the Lenten season. But yeah, it seems like reports of violence against pro-lifers are increasing rather than decreasing. So yeah, that's
Right.
one. Before I get into the next question, any follow up on what I just said at all? Do you feel like I know you're still on college campuses? I'm at law school, so I'm sort of on college campus, not quite as much as I used to be. But have you noticed any shifts in the way college students are maybe thinking about some of these issues or treating pro-lifers?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a huge percentage of women who get abortions are in college age or in their 20s. It definitely isn't, at least most often, like the 16-year-old girl that the media would like you to think it is. And so for college students, I think it's become a lot more personal of an issue. Now, a lot of people might not necessarily think about it all the time unless they're actually confronted with that positive pregnancy test, but it does feel more personal when someone is in college and thinking about, what if I were to get pregnant right now? And so then that becomes almost a defense they have to have in order to protect their hypothetical, like, future life, even if they're not pregnant. It becomes a lot more personal. Now, I would say, like you said, it can be harder to talk about, but interestingly, I wouldn't have predicted about this, but I think it's also become a little bit easier in that Americans are actually slightly shifting pro life. I wouldn't have expected that to happen after the media has basically inundated with all sorts of um, anti or pro abortion propaganda, but there's been several studies that have shown slight gains in pro life beliefs in Americans since Dobbs. And the fact of the matter is, most polling shows what the media doesn't want us to know. A vast majority of Americans oppose the unlimited abortion stance of the Democratic Party. And so I think people are seeing the truth come out in the midst of all the fear mongering. And that does change the type of decisions we have about abortion.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. It's definitely one of those things where the American people are interesting. Usually, not always, but whenever there's some kind of major legislative change or major Supreme Court decision, the American people kind of just accept it for a while. Now there are some notable exceptions. Plessy v. Ferguson, where it was held that segregation was okay. That was one that didn't sit right with the American people for a while, but yeah, when Brown v. Board passed, like people did eventually come to accept it in large numbers. Roe v. Wade, yeah, when it passed, the pro-life movement never really went away. There were some people at the time that saying that, yeah, the pro-life movement, now that Roe v. Wade has passed, is going to kind of shrink. People are kind of just accept that women have a right to murder their baby, really. And yeah, there's predictions like, yeah, pro-life movement, maybe it'll be 30% and 20% and 10%, and then eventually kind of everybody's just going to accept abortion. That never happened. Now, the amount of people that have identified as pro-life has definitely fluctuated. I think in some of our lowest seasons, we've been at least at 38%. So that's not a minority. That's still a pretty. I mean, it's a minority, but it's not a small number. 38% of Americans is quite
Right.
significant. We've never really pushed past. I think maybe one time we pushed past 50%. I think we got 51% at our high point. But yeah, abortion really has just been a staying issue. It's been a topic that's never really went away. And for yeah, those of us that are pro-life, we would just say it's like, yeah, because deep down inside, even your most ardent uh, pro-abortion advocate deep down knows there is something to a preborn life. There is something there, and
Right.
yeah, to say that abortion is fine all the way into up to 9 months. But even if you're not extreme, there still is something off about even having abortion. I would say in the first trimester, and that's why I'd say abortion has been a staying issue. I'm going to
Hmm.
shift gears just slightly. You did mention that on college campuses, a lot of people aren't really thinking about it until they get pregnant. Um, yeah, I do want to talk about pregnancy resource centers. Some people call it crisis pregnancy centers, but yeah, well, for this episode, we'll use the term pregnancy resource centers. But yeah, a woman gets pregnant, she's not really sure what to do. Uh, yeah, could you briefly just talk about pregnancy resource centers, what they are, what their mission is, and what kind of work they do?
Yeah, for sure. So, pregnancy resource centers are amazing organizations. They're life affirming centers that provide free of cost help for many people, especially pregnant and parenting women. So, they provide all sorts of stuff. Most often, you think of them providing like free pregnancy tests, counseling, ultrasounds, as well as some prenatal care, material goods. I mean, like diapers, clothes, everything you need to have a baby, formula. And many even offer financial support and things like the abortion pill reversal, which is huge. And as well as a lot of them have programs to help parents prepare to have children, parenting classes. And also, a growing number of them are also including maternity homes for moms in need. So they really provide services all across the board.
Yeah, yeah, no, awesome. I've personally talked to some women that have gone to a pregnancy resource center, and it's just like, yeah, they were able to get a lot of help. Sometimes women are in some pretty bad financial situations, and so to be able to get free resources like diapers or baby formula, that can go a long way. And yeah, helping these women to choose life and to take care um, of their child. So the left recently, pregnancy resource centers kind of basically started in the late 1960s, early 1970s when Roe v. Wade came down. And for the first 20 to 30 years, there was some criticism of them, but not a lot of criticism of them. Starting really in 1996, they started to receive federal funding, and that's when you started to see a lot of people on the left start to come out about it. Most notably, there's a Congressman, Henry Waxman, in 2006. He published a full report on why pregnancy resource centers are dangerous and misleading. So um, yeah, Karina, if you could just kind of maybe address some of those criticisms, and I'll just list maybe a few of the main ones briefly. A lot of the left would say, hey, these pregnancy resource centers, they spread misinformation about abortion. They say that abortions are more dangerous than they actually are, that they cause breast cancer and mental health issues. And so they said, this is bad. we shouldn't be funding them. In fact, maybe we should even close pregnancy resource centers down. Um, maybe let's hone in on that point particularly. What would you say about some of those criticisms of pregnancy resource centers? Do you think there's some truth to that? Do you think that they're overblowing it? What are your thoughts on that criticism?
Right. So it seems like the media and really the left want you to think that women are going in and basically running out having the most horrible experience. But surveys from thousands of these centers have found that 99% of clients who visit these centers report a positive experience. That's from CareNet, which is one of the largest affiliates of pro-life pregnancy centers. So clearly, women aren't having the horrible experience that the media would have you think. And abortion advocates are arguing that women are basically brought in there and forced to keep their children just because these centers don't refer for abortion, but that simply isn't true. Really, women are free to leave or change their mind at any point. They're not like pinning them down and saying you have to keep your baby. In fact, these centers are sharing more info about pregnancy choices than Planned Parenthood does. I mean, there's a reason why abortion facilities often don't want to show women their ultrasounds, even if they actually request it. It's because 80% of women choose life after seeing their baby on an ultrasound. Planned Parenthood really isn't a pregnancy support organization like they want you to think they are. So they're actually the ones that are manipulative, which is far from what pregnancy resource centers are. I mean, they're doing 200 abortions for every one adoption referral. Pregnancy resource centers are giving accurate information so that these women can make an actually informed pregnancy decision.
Yeah, yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I'm in law school, and one of the things we've been talking about in some of our cases is coercion, and I'll try not to get too deep into the weeds, but I think everybody knows the Miranda case. Certainly, people at least know Miranda rights, and the reason Miranda rights were put in place is um, so that police were not unjustly coercing uh, people into making confessions that they didn't want to make or anything like that. I've discovered it as I've talked to people and as I've read these cases. There's always going to be some coercion in people's lives. Maybe coercion's not the right word, but maybe influence, right? So everybody has family backgrounds that they come from. Everybody has friends that they have, and even when you're going to a doctor's office, or let's say in this case you're going to a pregnancy resource center or Planned Parenthood, as much information as these institutions give you, no place is totally unbiased, right? And the truth is, people can, like you just said, they can voluntarily go into these places and they can involuntarily leave these places. Um, but yeah, let's switch gears a little bit to I guess the topic of coercion. Yeah, some people would say when a woman goes to a pregnancy resource center and they get an ultrasound and the nurse is using the word baby when talking about the fetus, they would say that's emotionally manipulative, that's coercive. Um, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's really disingenuous for people to talk about the fetus, the preborn child, as if people don't otherwise refer to them as a baby. I mean, you have baby showers, you go to a normal OBGYN, they'll call it a baby. Baby isn't really a scientific term. Of course, the scientific term is fetus or embryo, but baby just is the term for a young human being. I mean, I hear like different stories, like I follow some pregnancy support organizations who put out fundraisers, and there will be women who are actively considering abortion saying like I don't want to do this to my baby. I had a friend who thought of them as a baby even when she was being pressured into having an abortion and still considering it. And so I think the idea that women uh, don't think that it's a baby really just kind of infantilizes women in a way. Like women know, at least a vast majority of them know that there is a baby there. So it's not going to completely change their mind when they're thinking, when someone uses the word baby when pointing to an ultrasound.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's a really good point. And I do believe words have power and language has power, but ultimately, if you have a woman that's at a Planned Parenthood and she's choosing to get an ultrasound, the workers at that Planned Parenthood could call it a fetus or an embryo all day long. But yeah, the fact is, like you just said, when that woman is looking at that ultrasound, again, the doctor may be calling it a fetus or something other than a baby, but it's just like that's going to have a profound impact on the woman when she sees that child in the womb, for sure. So
It, and even some now a lot of like Planned Parenthood and workers and stuff, of course, we'll just call it a clump of cells or a fetus, but there have been some infamous late-term abortionists who have actually referred to it as a baby. I don't know if you're aware of Leroy Carhart. He's a pretty famous late-term abortionist who actually passed away recently, but he did late-term abortions all the way up until birth. And there's an interview where he's talking with a woman, I believe, from BBC, and she's saying, it's surprising that you use the word baby. And he's like, well, it is a baby. I use that word with the clients. And so it's really disingenuous for abortion supporters to say, well, it's not a baby when these people whose entire livelihood is committing abortions are using that term too.
yeah, that's a really good point. And I mean, the fact is, when Roe v. Wade first came down, we didn't have access to a lot of technologies that we do now. But you look at the science, you look at the videos, it pretty clearly is a living human person. And I know you and me both believe that life begins at conception. But I mean, even if someone isn't completely 100% sure about that, I mean, you look at the sixth week. Some people dispute whether it's a heartbeat or not. Some people might call it cardiac activity. But I mean, it's just like, hey, something's happening. This baby is growing. Things are starting to function. Things are starting to move in place. Um, very, very early on by the pregnancy. So to me, I think there's going to be a point in time where the pro-abortion movement is going to just kind of have to accept that yes, it is a baby. I don't think they're going to stop supporting abortion. I think they'll shift the argument to like, okay, fine, it is a human baby, but we can still kill it because it doesn't have consciousness, or whatever lines of argument people continue to use now. But yeah, I mean, science continues to grow, and I think it's becoming very, very hard for the pro-abortion movement to say that yeah, this isn't a baby. So
Right. And I mean, I've seen even in the last few years a growth in pro abortion advocates actually acknowledging it's a human life, acknowledging that there is a human being there. It's actually becoming more of an outdated argument, at least for some of these really advanced pro abortion like apologists to say, like, oh, we don't know when life begins. They're kind of just acknowledging it and saying, well, it doesn't necessarily have value then. Or there's like the complete bodily autonomy argument, which says, it can be a human life, that can be a whole baby, that can be a human child, but just because it's in my body, it doesn't matter and I can override that. And so, while that is very disturbing to hear, it's also showing that people are waking up to the science, and the average person, when they hear it as a human child, is going to be very, at the very least, very uncomfortable with the idea of killing them. And so there is some positive to hearing these abortion advocates, even if they're advocating for killing them, acknowledging that there's a human life there, because that's really undeniable.
yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, it's just you can one of the first pro-life movies was The Silent Scream in the '80s, and um, I felt like that movie on its own was enough to change the conversation. But yeah, I mean, even now, several decades past that film, it's just like our technology just keeps getting better and better, and every time we look inside a womb and we look at the child, it's just like, yeah, it's like this is clearly a human baby. We'll switch gears to or I guess switch gears back to politics. The Trump administration currently has signaled that they are um, somewhat pro-life. I know Trump has made statements that he'd prefer to keep it a states' rights issue, because I know obviously us in the pro-life movement, we would hopefully like to see a federal ban at some point, or for me, I would love to see a constitutional amendment saying, yeah, life begins at conception. If we're gonna have the right to life, liberty, and property, but we don't know when that starts, I do think that's problematic. So a constitutional amendment saying that would be great. But yeah, Trump is funding these pregnancy resource centers. Some on the left, Senator Elizabeth Warren is one. They have proposed what's called the SAD Act. So that is Stop Anti-Abortion Disinformation Act. And what that act would do is it would target pregnancy resource centers, and it would either heavily regulate these pregnancy resource centers, or in some cases, I think even shut down um, a lot of these places. I don't think this act will pass anytime soon. As of the date of this recording, the government is still controlled by the Republican Party. Maybe in 4 years that changes. Lord willing, not. But maybe in 4 years that changes. But I guess in light of these competing sites, what do you think is the future of pregnancy resource centers? I mean, I know politics changes every day, so that might not always be the easiest question. But um, do you feel a sense of optimism? Do you think these pregnancy resource centers will be able to continue to operate as they really have been these last few decades? Or do you think there's some real danger possibly coming up um, as the post Dobbs years go along?
Sure. So obviously, this is just another attempt to silence the free speech and any opposing voices to their pro-abortion propaganda. Clearly, they feel very threatened by these donor-funded nonprofit organizations giving free help. But when it comes down to it, when polled, given explanations of what these centers are, over 90% of Americans support them. So, what pro abortion Democrats are doing and trying to defund and basically destroy these clinics is wildly unpopular. But of course, yeah, the future of the nature of pregnancy centers ultimately depends on lawmakers and how they decide to restrict them. I really believe no matter what, the pro life movement is committed to helping pregnant women in need, and they won't stop no matter what kind of restrictions could be added. I mean, there are also several great legal organizations, as I'm sure you know, like Alliance Defending Freedom, who has led several prominent Supreme Court cases, including Dobbs, and defended pregnancy centers in many cases. And so, to be honest, I don't see them being restricted a whole lot. I could see them say maybe you have to put a sign on the window saying we don't refer for abortions, which they already do on their websites anyways. But I really don't see any major shift happening, Lord willing, as long as the pro life movement is here to advocate for them.
Yeah, for sure. And I tend to be a little bit on the pessimistic side, but I do think the worst case scenario right now looks like okay, maybe a form of the SAD Act passes and pregnancy resource centers are no longer federally funded. And then maybe they're required to put up signs, which again, like you said, they already put it on their websites, but maybe it's displayed on the outside too that they do not refer for abortions or perform abortions. But hey, crisis. These crisis pregnancy centers or pregnancy resource centers, they have been operating for decades, and again, they didn't start to receive federal funding until 1996. So for about the 3 to 4 decades prior to that, um, yeah, they were just getting support from mostly Christians on the ground, but other just pro life people that were like, "Hey, this is an important resource. We love what these institutions are doing." And yeah, I have to look back at the statistics, but I think pregnancy resource centers outnumber Planned Parenthoods by a pretty significant margin. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe we don't have federal support anymore. But yeah, you can't stop private citizens, right? If a private citizen wants to donate to these things, and many private citizens do, really the only thing they could try to do is maybe try to stop private persons from donating, and I think that is a very difficult
Right.
case for them to make. Uh,
Yeah.
so, uh, cool, Karina. That's all I have. Any last minute thoughts, comments on post Dobbs things, the pro life movement, its future in general, or pregnancy resource centers at all?
Sure. I just wanted to point out, I was going to earlier, but just I guess to promote these centers even more. One of the top reasons women do have abortions is because of financial instability. So these centers are very vital to saving lives. And I mean, they estimated that in just 5 years, they led to over 800,000 lives saved. And so, to anyone listening or watching, I definitely encourage you to find your local pregnancy center, support them any way you can, whether that's through volunteering or donation. But they really are on the front lines, saving so many lives. So it's very important to advocate for them.
Yes, I completely agree. Yeah, the work that these pregnancy resource centers do is really incredible, and yeah, I'm so grateful. I know several people who were thinking about aborting and then they didn't, and I know their children, and it's just like so beautiful to see what God has been doing through these institutions. Karina, thank you again for the work that you do. I'm really grateful for what you're doing in Minnesota. And so I just continue to, yeah, again, guys, if you don't follow her, but you would like to, please go follow her and support her work. She does a great work in the pro-life movement. And so, Karina, thank you again for joining me for this episode. And yeah, again, guys, yeah, please go and support those pregnancy resource centers. They could use a lot of support right now.
Right. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.